Tonight, Katana shows us that if you can't wrap up all of the plots by the final issue, just don't. Nobody was reading your book anyway. Superboy demonstrates that you can completely write off your main character and start a brand new book under the same title. And in the year 3000, the only evidence we have of Justice League is the Zack Snyder version. May God have mercy on us all. All that and more tonight on the Not-So-New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 119 of the Not-So-New 52. I am your host, and for those of you who have been following this show pretty much since the beginning, you'll know that the very first Christmas episode I had COVID. And that just sucked. That was awful, and I didn't want to do it again. So the very next Christmas, I got COVID again. And that's because God hates me and everything that I'm trying to do with this show. So this year I made the resolution. I said, okay, in the weeks leading up to the Christmas episode, and I guess Christmas as a whole, but mostly the Christmas episode, I'm not going to see anyone. I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to stay at home like the hermit I am and make sure that I stay healthy. But there still had to be a date when I started that plan, and that date, as of the release of this episode, was about like 3 days ago. That's the day I picked. So right after I released last week's episode, I went and hung out with some friends, and wouldn't you know it, I got COVID. Great, awesome, super cool. But at least, and the whole reason I'm bringing this up, is I will be COVID-free by Christmas. It's already more or less worked its way through my system. I just have a really sore throat. Now, I bring that up for a secondary reason here. This is my second time recording the first half of this show. I did 6 comics worth of commentary and then realized, oopsie doodles, my microphone was turned off. Happens. I'm not going to pretend like it's not frustrating, but it does mean that my voice is already on its way out, and it's only going to get worse from here. So I apologize if by the end of this episode I sound like I smoke 15 packs a day, but that's just how it's got to be. Anyway, because I don't want to spend my entire time talking here, let me tell you the comics that are coming out this week. This week, in no particular order, we have new issues of Forever Evil Arkham War, Batgirl, Batman, Nightwing, Superboy, Superman/Wonder Woman, Green Lantern Corps, Justice League of America, Katana, World's Finest, Suicide Squad, and Constantine. Now, big to note out of that is pretty much all of them. Pretty much all of them have something going on with them. So we've got, in terms of Forever Evil tie-ins, Suicide Squad, Justice League, and Justice League of America, as well as, of course, Forever Evil Arkham War are all part of that. Constantine is a Forever Evil Blight tie-in, or I should say a core part of that story, but the story overall is a tie-in within itself, so it all gets confusing at a point. Superboy, worth noting, because it has a brand new writing team, and they essentially say, hey, have you been reading Superboy for the past 25 issues? Screw you. We're just starting fresh. We've got a new Superboy going on. The only thing you need to be reading is Teen Titans Annual, number 2. That's it. That's the only thing you need, which I think is still a pretty big ask, but hey, I'll take it. And Katana. Katana's a big one because this is the 10th and final issue of Nocenti series, which I don't like to speak ill of people, but I am so happy that this is ending. I cannot express my gratitude enough. And of course, how could I forget? I skipped over the biggest one, the new comic coming out this week. We got a brand new number 1 in Justice League 3000, written by J.M. DeMatteis and Keith Giffen, the team that brought us Larfleeze, I believe. So most likely a comedy book. Spoiler, it is a comedy book, kinda. It's a bit more serious, but give it a chance. It's actually quite an interesting premise. Anyway, all that's coming up. I'm already regretting talking as much as I have been, so let's just jump right on in to whatever Forever Evil tie-in I decide to go with first. Forever Evil Arkham War number 3, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Scot, Eaton. So last issue, we had Bane, we had the Arkhamites having a plan to break into Arkham to steal the Talons. It was kind of going off without a hitch, but then Bane stepped in, managed to capture Man-Bat, and keep one of the Talons for himself. So this issue picks up with Mad Hatter and Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze is the one who's doing the unthawing of the Talons, and he's basically like, everything in my previous stories tells me I hate Talons. Why should I be helping them at all? And Mad Hatter reminds him, you're not helping them, you're helping us, your other Arkhamites, because Bane is coming, and if we don't have Talons, we're going to get our asses handed to us. So at that point, we cut to Killer Croc coming out of the sewers with Scarecrow in his arms. Turns out that when Bane was laying the smackdown, Croc managed to save Scarecrow. Scarecrow leads him to Wayne Tower and basically says, hey, Croc, thank you so much. I really owe you one. And I'm going to pay that off right now. Wayne Tower is yours. Do with it as you please. And Croc is like, I kind of like to stick to the sewers. That's kind of my whole thing. And Scarecrow's like, right, I get it totally, but this is Wayne Tower. So take it and stop being such a prick about this. So at that point, we see the fight between the Arkhamites and the Blackgate people, as well as Bane's henchmen, is still going on out in the streets. We see there's a family there who call out Bane's mercenaries and just like, oh, why don't you get out of here, you mercenaries? And he's just like, oh, all right, let's make an example of you. And he goes and tries to punch the husband in the face. Turns out it's Clayface, who just immediately absorbs this guy and takes him down. And he's like, all right, I'm coming after you. Why don't you pick on your own size? And then Clayface gets frozen in solid ice, and we see that it is Emperor Penguin using one of Mr. Freeze's guns. And just like, oh yeah, Bane was right. You guys at Arkham just always blab in the middle of your fights. You never know when to... And then Poison Ivy manages to get him as he's blabbing in the middle of his fight, wrapping him up with vines. And she's just like, hey, Emperor Penguin, remember me? We kind of had a story together in the backups of Detective Comics. Anyway, Arkham rules, bitch. So at that point, Bane steps up, grabs Poison Ivy, lifts her up and just throws her down to the ground and says, hey, you Emperor Penguin? And he's like, mm-hmm. So he uses some defoliant spray to get rid of the vines on Emperor Penguin, freeing him, and then immediately punches him in the face, snapping his neck. So Bane delivers Emperor Penguin's corpse to Penguin, just like, there, our end of the deal is held up. Me and you are chill now. Like, you got to give me my information. Where are the Talons? And Penguin's like, Bane, out here in Batman or in Gotham without Batman, it's totally crazy. But not you and me. We're higher society than these other lowlifes. And he's just like, Jesus Christ, Cobblepot, I do not care about whatever it is you're talking about. Just tell me what I need to know. And Cobblepot tells him, like, look, I don't know exactly where they're at, but I know that Scarecrow is holding up in Wayne Towers. So that's a pretty good place to start, at least. Also, there's something that you need to understand, Bane. The Arkham inmates are going nuts out there, and that's while they still know that you are around and you are a threat. You don't scare them like Batman did. You're not Batman. And Bane takes that personally. So he goes back to Blackgate. A bunch of his men are getting patched up. And one of them's like, hey, Bane, could we have some basic supplies or like anything? And he's just like, screw you, I'm busy. And he goes down to a lower level where there's a bunch of supplies, like iron working supplies. And he starts crafting himself some armor in the shape of Batman's cowl and crest. And he puts it all on. And he's like, all right, Batman lives. So we see Croc is bringing all of his people into Wayne Tower and just like, hey guys, I know that you want to stay down in the sewer, but we can really make this work. I'm feeling pretty good about this. We can take over this city. And as they're all cheering for King Croc, Batman, who's of course actually Bane, bursts in through the window and just starts wailing on him. And Croc does fight back. He does start biting down on Batman's stuff. And it's a pretty bloody fight, all things considered, but Bane quickly ends it by taking his crest off of his chest, which is like 2 inches thick of solid steel, and just bashing Croc's head over. And then he picks Croc up and throws him out the window. And mind you, they're at like the top floor, so he has quite a ways to go down. So as Croc is falling, Bane looks down and he's like, there, I took out their strongest guy. Now nobody has any reason to think they could stand against me. They overestimated him. They're going to underestimate me. And I'm going to get my goddamn talons back. So, yeah, that's what Bane is doing. It's a very quick read. It's very fast. It does seem like we've dropped some of the subplots that were going on in previous issue. Like the whole Jim Gordon getting the warden out of Blackgate. Like that all just went away. And I think all the better for it. I think that this issue flowed a lot better when we're focusing just on what is Bane and the Arkham people, like what's their focus? What are they aiming for? Beyond that, it's a fine issue. I can't say it's standout in any way. It's probably just a straight 7 if I have to give it a rating, but it's perfectly suitable for what it is. I do think this leads a lot more into what we're going to be doing with the back 3 issues, back 3 and a special. We're going to see Bane basically taking on this role as the Batman while Batman is gone, and he'll have his own dark twist to it and how he's handling Gotham's quote-unquote criminals of the Arkhamites. So, yeah, all in all, I'm interested still, but it's not a great issue, so a flat 7's good enough. Justice League number 25, written by Geoff Johns, art by Doug Mahnke. So this is just another one of those backstories of what's going on with the crime syndicate. And this one happens to be Owlman. So we see 30 years ago in a alternate universe, Earth 3, we've got Thomas Wayne, Martha Wayne, Bruce Wayne, and Thomas Wayne Jr. making their way from a movie, and essentially, Martha and Thomas are bickering over money because Thomas Wayne is apparently a very sadistic surgeon who just has so much medical malpractice suits against him that it's draining their family fortune dry. And as they're bickering, Thomas Wayne Jr. takes Bruce under his arm and holds up a gun and says, "Hey, Mom and Dad, put up your dukes, put up your arms." And he explains, "You are draining our family fortune. You're not going to leave anything for me and Bruce. So I'm going to kill you now, and we're going to take what's rightfully ours." And Bruce is like, Tommy, I don't think I'm cool with this anymore. And he's just like, "Bruce, stop being such a little bitch. We're going to go ahead and kill Mom and Dad." And the mom immediately is just like, "Oh, yeah, you think you got it in you? Let's see it, huh? You don't got it. You're grounded, kid." And Bruce tackles Tommy, to the ground, starts wrestling him. But then all of a sudden, the parents get bullet wounds to their chest. They immediately die, and Bruce also gets shot in the chest, and we see that it is Alfred of this universe who's basically stepping up and saying, "There you go, Master Thomas, our plan succeeded." And as Bruce looks up from Crime Alley, he sees an owl perched there calling out, "Who?" And he takes that as "Oh, you ask who I am? I'm Thomas Wayne Jr., bitch." And he shoots Bruce one more time for good measure. So then we cut to now. And there's a meeting of a bunch of gangsters going on, including one that's playing with a rubber band. Wouldn't you know it? And his name is Eel. So we see the gangsters are essentially having a meeting to try to come up with any sort of reason to give to the crime syndicate of how they could be useful. And they're pretty much coming up dry because the crime syndicate only cares about superhumans. And Eel views this as a positive. He's like, "Yeah, they don't care about us. We can easily just sneak under the radar. No big deal." But then Owlman bursts in through the roof and just starts kicking everyone's ass, killing them almost immediately. We see a couple of barrels holding some form of chemicals start spilling out on some of the gangsters, including Eel. And Eel gets caught in this chemical explosion. His skin just starts melting. It looks very plasticky as he screams out for help. It's Plastic Man, for anyone who didn't know. That's Plastic Man's origin now, is Owlman did it. So we see Owlman has taken the two heads of the crime families that were talking, and he's basically like, "Look, I want to be able to run Gotham City through one of you. One of you will control all the crime, and you'll do whatever I say. So who's going to be my stooge?" And they just start tripping over each other, trying to "Oh, it's me. I'm a better stooge. I'll do it." Until one of them says, "I promise, I'll do whatever you say, Batman." And Owlman just cuts him loose, lets him fall from the top of a building, and says to the other one, "All right, you work for me now. You'll do whatever I say. Your family is mine." And that's kind of a recurring thing in Owlman's inner monologue is he's trying to build a family to replace the one that he killed. So we cut back to the Watchtower, and Grid is basically talking to the outsider, Alfred, and is just like, yeah, a lot of people we feel like are going to try to rescue Dick Grayson since we unmasked him. We probably should kill him. And that's what most of the crime syndicate thinks. But then Owlman shows up and be like, it's not what I think. Does Ultraman want to kill him? And just like, yes. And it's like, does he have any other plans that I don't know about? I was like, no. It's like, what about Superwoman? She's not here. Okay, well, I'm going to go talk to Dick Grayson. Turn off all the cameras. So Grid turns to Alfred and is just like, hey, what is he hoping to achieve here? And he's like, oh, he wants Dick Grayson to join us. And Grid's like, he's not going to do that. And Alfred's like, yeah, I know, but I'm still going to help him. He's my family. So we see a flashback to the Dick Grayson of the Earth 3 universe. And it turns out he had a sister in this universe as well. And her name was Rachel. And then one night, all of their ropes break except for Dick's, and they all die. And there waiting in order to take him in is Thomas Wayne Jr. And we see him saying, oh, I'm right here for you. And then in the current universe, he comes up to our own Dick Grayson, and he puts his hand on his shoulder and says, hey, I'm here for you. And Dick Grayson's like, what are you talking about, dude? And he's like, oh, well, in my universe, Dick Grayson called me a brother. He was a close friend of mine, and I want you to be that. And he's like, dude, you're insane. I'm not going to do that. And he's like, no, I know you're not the same Dick Grayson, but look, we have unmasked you. Your life is over. There's no way you can go back to being Nightwing. And at that point, Nightwing's like burst out of his chains. They're having a fight, but Owlman just continues the conversation anyway. And he's like, the plans that the crime syndicate has, the plans that Ultraman has, is he's going to take over the world and he's going to rule it with an iron fist. However, in this universe, there is only so much kryptonite and Ultraman is weak without it. So either we can let the world be ruled by Ultraman, or you can let the world be ruled by me with you at my side. What do you say? And Nightwing, he understands that, like, you know, better that there's a Batman than a Superman. And he says, yeah, sure. All right, I'm in. And he's like, cool, awesome. Gonna need to tie you back up, though, because, like, Crime Syndicate doesn't want you out and about. They want to kill you. So I got to just, like, reason them to not do that. And we get two little reveals here. The first is in the Earth 3 universe that Thomas Wayne Jr. actually orchestrated the death of the Flying Graysons in order to get Dick Grayson to be his ward because he just wanted his own talent at that point. And then in our universe, turns out Superwoman was actually around. She heard Owlman's whole plan, and now she'll probably use it for blackmail or something. So yeah, overall, it's a fine issue. I do feel like I already heard the Owlman origin from, like, a different book. I can't remember what book it was, but there was some other book where, like, we were talking about the Outsider's origin. We were going through his whole thing, and, like, he explained exactly the same things. We saw exactly the same things. So it's a bit weird that we took that much time in this issue to explain basically the exact same origin again, but I mean, it looks fine. It's told well. I'm not that worried about it. Beyond that, I think this one is probably the best in terms of tie-ins, in that it's not required reading to understand a core premise of the plot, but it is adding this deeper layer to the crime syndicate that you wouldn't get through the core Forever Evil book. So I think this one's a pretty good tie-in, all things considered. I probably would give it I'll give it an 8. I think I actually really like this one. Not the Plastic Man bit. That's just solid on its own. I think that's a brutal origin, but I wish they would have rolled with that because, spoiler alert, they didn't really do anything with it for the rest of the New 52 to the best of my knowledge. So, yeah, it's a fine book. It's doing strong. I don't think that it's required, but then again, it's a tie into an event. So they tell you that pretty much up front. Justice League of America number 10, written by Matt Kindt, art by Tom Derenick and Eddy Barrows. So last issue, we had Martian Manhunter in the head of Stargirl escaping the prison that the rest of the Justice League is held in, and then Stargirl runs into Deathstroke and his merry men. It's a lot. Anyway, this issue is basically two completely separate plots, which makes it a bitch to try to recap. But I'm just going to give you the two plots completely separately, and just know that they are interspersed constantly with each other. So the first plot is the flashbacks, where we see Stargirl's essentially origin. Last issue we saw that she found her stepdad's box out in the garage that had the star rod in it and the costume. And at this point, she is sitting in bed and she sees this vision of Martian Manhunter saying, Courtney, you need to focus. And that's a running theme throughout these flashbacks, is that these are her memories that she's having mid-fight with Deathstroke and crew. And Martian Manhunter being in her head is trying to snap her out of it and get her to focus. But just know that that's happening throughout. So we see her talking to her friend Tuan after the video hit online, and he's just like, look, it's great and all, but you need a better costume. That was like loose fitting and awful for you. So they go to a costume shop and they manage to make a new Stargirl outfit, and they upload a new video online, and yeah, it's got like 10 million hits. She's hyper popular. But because of that, her stepdad Pat finds out, and Pat basically says, you need to stop this. You need to not do that anymore. And Courtney immediately snaps back like, you're not my real dad. You just married my mom. You suck. So at that point, Pat says, look, all right, the power rod, it's too much for you to control, but if you're not going to listen to me, I've talked to your mom, I'm going to teach you how to use it, but we're going to take this super slow to make sure that you know what's going on before you go out there. And he's just like, okay, why? And he explains, the person who originally used that, who wore that costume originally, died wearing it. It is not something to mess with. So at that point, we see him basically trying to give her lessons slowly, trying to teach her very briefly how to use it. And she's just like, I can't take it. I just got to get out there again. It's intoxicating. I really got to do it. And we see her flying around, and she's trying to sneak around, not being caught using it. But the news catches her flying around downtown, and her parents see it. And she's like, oh, I can explain. And that's how she actually gets donned the name Stargirl, is the news gives it to her. So Pat takes her out to the garage, just being like, okay, if you're not going to listen to me, then I will speed up your training. I will tell you what you need to know. But like, you need to understand this. It is deadly. It is not something to mess around with. And he starts giving her just the full rope, saying like, the best place to grab it is in these two spots. If you twist this knob, it'll fire more energy off. And Courtney realizes, she's been hard on him. And she's just like, hey, Pat, I'm sorry. I know I haven't been the greatest to you. And he's like, look, I get it. I've been distant from you. I've been trying to hide this thing, and I understand I'm moving in on your life. I get it. I just want you to be careful. I wouldn't want anything to happen to you. And we see that he is still training her the entire time, but she is resistant to it. She's not like taking him seriously when he says how dangerous it is, until finally one night on the news, some terrorist has taken a hostage and basically says, I'm not going to let her go until Super comes here to try to stop me. And Courtney realizes this is it. She needs to go out there. She needs to do it. And her parents just say like, no, it's a trap. You're not ready for this. It's too much. And she's just like, if I don't go, that guy's going to get hurt. I have to at least try. And we see she also has a younger brother that was not brought up before. So the younger brother's like, oh, what's going on? Why is everyone yelling? And Courtney goes to walk out the door, and her parents basically say like, Courtney, you're not ready. Don't do it. Don't leave. And I'll pause on that plot for a minute, just to go back to the other plot that's going on with the Deathstroke stuff. So she's in the middle of a fight between Deathstroke, Blockbuster, Copperhead, and Shadow Thief. And Martian Manhunter is in her head trying to give her information, just being like, oh, you can take these guys on in a fight, but probably not these guys. And that one's skill is to do this. And she's just like, oh my God, you being in my head is giving me such a migraine. Like, it's physically painful for you to be in my head right now. Get out. And he's just like, oh, okay, look, I'll tried my best to shut up, but like, you have my powers, you can use them. And he tries to guide her into using his powers to escape the fight. And she's just like, no, I'm going to keep on fighting. So, also Giganta's there. I completely forgot about that. So using Martian Manhunter's abilities, she does manage to put up a fight against this group. And she uses some super strength to take down Giganta and Blockbuster. She uses phasing to get out of Copperhead's tail. And she uses some level of like frequency vibration or something to take out Shadow Thief's shadow suit. And the entire time Martian Manhunter's like telling her what to do, and he's just like, shut up, shut up, shut up, I don't want to hear it. Until finally Deathstroke shows up, And Deathstroke is just too much. And Martian Manhunter says, like, yeah, we can't deal with him. We better just fly away. So Courtney flies out, flies over DC, sees that everything's just on fire, and she's worried about her family. She's worried about what's happening to them. And Martian Manhunter says, like, okay, well, we need to go find the Justice League. Like, they're nearby. We can do it. And she's like, no, I'm going to go find my family. That's more important to me. If you want to get out of my head and go search for them yourself, be my guest. And he's like, fine, but I need you to, like, sit down so I can meditate if I'm going to do that. So we get that last thing with, like, the terrorists and all that. And at that point, because her parents are ordering her what to do and saying, don't go out there. And also Manhunter saying, oh, we have to go find the Justice League. We have to do this. It's important. Stargirl just snaps inside of the memory, grabs Martian Manhunter, throws him through a wall, and just being like, I am so sick of being told what to do and how to do it. I am my own person, and I'm going to do things right. And, like, you guys just make it up as much as I do. Like, you don't know anything more than me when it comes to this sort of stuff, so why don't you just leave me alone? And we see at that, because of her little temper tantrum, Martian Manhunter has separated out of her body, but he is weak. He is barely able to stand on his own. And Stargirl says, look, you can look for the Justice League. I'm going to protect my family. So she flies off, and we're left with Martian Manhunter, who can feel the power of the Justice League nearby, and through whatever sort of psychic means, finds out the prison is Firestorm, and he is on a countdown timer to exploding and killing them all. So, yeah, big reveal there. However, here's the thing, and it's possibly an editorial problem with this event, is that I remember this has been revealed elsewhere. I can't remember where. I can't remember which issue, but there was definitely another issue where they explicitly said, like, they are imprisoned in Firestorm and he is going to explode. And I understand the idea that, okay, well, some people may not have read that issue, and therefore we need to reestablish it here in case they were reading this issue. And I get that. But you made that reveal, and I can't overstate this. The reveal is the entire buildup from the last 3 issues, is that they are inside of Firestorm. So I feel like it's an editorial thing that if it's revealed elsewhere first, then it shouldn't be such a mind-blowing thing here that that's what you were building to this entire time. It feels like a bit of a letdown, you know? I don't know. It's an editorial thing. It probably should have just been structured better. You could still have the reveal in the other book to keep people up to date no matter what they're reading, but put it after this. Put it after this reveal is made, so that way this book is allowed to be its own thing and have its shock reveal, and then the other one can just drop it as that little, like, oh yeah, and this is going on, by the way. For people reading Justice League of America, it's not a big shock, but for everyone else, it's the reveal they needed. Anyway, yeah, beyond all that, it's an okay book. I do like the dueling narratives. I think it comes together in a good way of showing Stargirl wanting to do her own thing, be her own person. It's just really hard to recap in that way because it is these dueling narratives back and forth. All in all, I'd say it's probably, I'll give it a 7. And I would give it higher if it were a bit more, I don't want to say focused, but like the fight between Deathstroke and the rest of the villains just felt so unnecessary because it never felt like there was any tension there. However, on the other side of things, I also would give it lower because of that, you know? Like it's I don't know, it's a strange little dividing it where I think that a 7's just kind of exactly where it needs to be. But beyond that, we'll see what comes up next issue. I'm sure that we're going to continue on with the Stargirl plot as well as the Martian Manhunter one. Suicide Squad number 26, written by Matt Kindt, art by Patrick Zircher. So, Forever Evil tie-in. And last issue, Harley Quinn betrayed the team and took OMAC to Thinker and then dropped a mountain on the team. And then also there was a thing where Amanda Waller was freeing Kane, the father of King Shark. However, in this issue, his name is now Kamo. Kamo. I literally can flip between the pages and see the different names. I don't know what happened there, but we'll go with Kamo. So this issue opens up with a backstory to Belle Reve and basically says it was a normal prison back in the day, the 1800s, but instead of holding your petty criminals, it was like a supermax prison. It was holding the ones who were really good at being criminals, who made it like a career sort of thing. And so over the years, Belle Reve would, of course, go through many administrations. It would be torn down, it would be rebuilt, so on and so forth, until eventually it was on its most recent iteration under its most recent administration. And that's when Superman showed up. And immediately everyone was like, all right, we now have to deal with superpowered villains and criminals. How are we going to hold them? So they used all of their super tech stuff and all their science in order to build cells that could hold these criminals and keep them all in one place. Because what could go wrong by keeping all of your super powered criminals in one place? And then forever evil happened, and they found out exactly what went wrong. So anyway, Amanda Waller went down to level 7 when we last saw her, and as I said, freed Kamo, who is now fighting against King Shark. And Waller's like, all right, gotta be honest, I kind of wish this would have turned out a different way. And she's trying to talk to King Shark, saying like, hey, don't fight him, don't kill him. And King Shark's like, why? He's gonna kill me. And Kamo's immediately like, yeah, you're my offspring. All of my offspring tried to betray me and take my throne. I won't let that happen. And King Shark's immediately like, Dad? That's you, Dad? So King Shark's not fighting back that hard. And Amanda Waller's like, yeah, nah, he's got incredible power. Kamo is way beyond our limits to be able to control. It reminds me a lot of the first time I saw OMAC, and we get a flashback to her watching a soldier undergoing the OMAC virus that transforms them into OMAC. But then we get a cutaway to James Gordon Jr., who is still working with Amanda Waller, trying to figure out what the Thinker's up to. So he goes up to the Thinker's machine that he's built, stabs a few of the guards, and says, all right, well, now I just got to wait to see what happens next. And then the plane that has Harley Quinn and OMAC in it just drops OMAC to the ground. He lands with a huge thud. And Gordon Jr. is like, oh, great, cool. But why'd they drop him so close to Thinker? And that's when Harley Quinn jumps out, lands on Gordon's back, and it's just like, hey, I'm going to kill you now. And Gordon immediately gets triggered by this because apparently he's got touch issues. But we go back to the Kamo King Shark fight, and Amanda Waller tries to get in the way. And she's like, wait, Kamo, hold on. Here's the thing. King Shark isn't trying to take your throne, but there is someone who is. His name is OMAC, and he's right upstairs. So if you decide to help us take out OMAC, I will let you not only take back your throne, but also a big part of the earth, and also will break the spell that's keeping you here. There's no spell. She's making that up. So Kamo's like, all right, tell me what's up. What did you do? So then we get Kamo's backstory. And by backstory, I mean, how did Amanda Waller manage to get him here? And the answer is, there is no answer. They found out Superman was a thing. OMAC was still being tested. And they're like, all right, we need something superpowered. So they heard about this island deity that required human sacrifices in the form of young girls. They went to check it out, and there's Kamo. So they just somehow boxed him up and were trying to use his energy. And they realized that he was using the young girls to essentially breed these strange human shark hybrids. So they picked up one of them, kept it in a tank, and that became King Shark. But in terms of Kamo, they realized he's too powerful. We can't hope to control that. We're just going to throw him in the basement and hope that one day we can figure out what to do with him. So we cut back to the Harley and Gordon plot, and Gordon manages to take a knife and stab it into Harley's back. And Gordon's like, look, if you move at all, that's going to sever your vertebra. So you're just going to listen to what I have to say, and then I'll take out the knife. What the hell's going on? What did you do? And she's like, oh, I betrayed the team, and I'm delivering OMAC to the Thinker. And he's like, why? And she's like, that's just kind of my thing. Chaotic evil. You know how it is. And Gordon's like, all right, fair enough. However, you need to work for me now. And he pulls out the knife and immediately snaps an explosive collar around her neck and says, cool. Now that'll explode if you ever disobey me. So you're on my side. And Harley's like, ooh, Gordon, I'm suddenly getting the flutters. And he's like, oh, don't. Just do not. So he gets a bit more information from her about what she knows, which is not a lot. And he's like, all right, guess we'll just wait to see what's going on. Wait, where's OMAC? Turns out Thinker's already got OMAC inside of the machine he's built, and he's doing a brain transfer. Just straight up, he's ditching his old man body and putting it into hyper-strong OMAC body. So we finish Waller's flashback to the OMAC virus being tested on that guy. He didn't survive for long, but he did survive as OMAC briefly, and he managed to show just this unimaginable show of force as he just immediately busted through every defense they had. And he eventually died. He was, too much, but they still wanted an OMAC for themselves, and they eventually found one that could contain the OMAC virus. It became a whole separate book at the beginning of the New 52, and now that they finally found it again, Waller's like, all right, that's too dangerous to be in the hands of anybody, let alone the Thinker. So she gets together her team now of Gordon, Harley, Camo, and King Shark, and is like, cool, number one job is we're going to take out the Thinker and also OMAC. Camo, I said that if you helped us out, you could have like a piece of the earth. Sure. So at that point, they look around and they see this giant hole in the machine the Thinker's in. And like, well, there's Thinker's body. Where's OMAC? And then OMAC immediately comes out. He's like, the Thinker, I am in his brain now. I am the Thinker in OMAC's brain. I'm going to punch you. And he punches Camo, which is it's apparently very hard to do that. Manages to like take him out for a second. And Amanda Waller's like, oh, we're all dead. There's no way we're going to be able to survive this. So then we cut back to the mountain that Harley dropped on her team. And Deadshot is coming too. And he's just like, boy, oh boy, I can't wait to see who I'm going to kill when I get back to Bellerive. So, of course, Deadshot's alive. That was never a shock to begin with. I think this issue's good, but I do think it goes a bit too heavy on the exposition. I think there's just a bit too much going on with everything where we're saying, okay, here's not only Camo's origin, but we're also going to give a brief slide over to here's King Shark's origin. And then we're going to give this origin of the OMAC virus as well. And then I kind of skipped over it, but we also see Jim Gordon Jr.'s childhood of his mother, like not showing him enough physical attention. So that's why he's so triggered by someone grabbing onto him. Like too much exposition. Just keep it to what we need for this issue, which for this issue, I think is Camo. We need to know, why is this island deity in a vault underneath Bellerive? You focus on that, the rest should come easy. But clearly that's not what we were doing, so it's a little bit overstuffed. All in all, I'll give this one a 6.5. Not fantastic, but I am still enjoying this idea of duplicity and Waller just having to roll with the punches of however it is she's going to manage to come out on top of this. And yeah, it's an interesting concept, but not above a 6.5. Constantine number 9, written by Ray Fawkes, art by Aiko and Beni Lobel. So this is the next part of Forever Evil Blight. The last part was in Phantom Stranger, and in that part, it was basically just the team getting together. We saw that Blight managed to get himself a physical form, and as the team was ready to start their plan, they just immediately got trashed because Blight's that strong. So we open up in Central Park, where the entire team is reintroduced for anybody who wasn't reading Phantom Stranger. And this entire issue, and I cannot overstate that, the entire issue is just Constantine's inner monologue going, I really, really, really miss Zatanna. She was always the light of my life. I can't believe she's quote-unquote gone, and I really need her right now. And it comes back in some ways, but for the most part, it's just like strangely heartfelt for Constantine. Anyway, as the team gets reevaluated, they're like, okay, what happened? We got tossed out of the House of Mystery. I don't even know how that happens. Immediately, Pandora starts freaking out. She's like, guys, I can sense evil, and there's a whole bunch of it coming our way. And she points over to the New York skyline, and we see Blight in his human form, being accompanied by all of the sins that Pandora has spent her whole series trying to fight. And Blight not only has a human form, but he also has his giant, shadow dragon form as well. So immediately the fight starts off. Everyone's using whatever magic they can. Phantom Stranger is immediately like, okay, hold on, this is a bit much. I don't think we can manage to do this. Constantine's like, dude, we literally just started. Please, focus down. Swamp Thing, do something. Swamp Thing starts making trees and whatnot. Pandora starts firing at Blight's human form, but then Phantom Stranger stops her and says, wait a minute. That kid, the human form, is like a kid that I'm responsible for in my book. Don't shoot him. And at that point, Nightmare Nurse looks at Constantine and just be like, hey, do we need an out? I think we need an out. Let's go. So she teleports them all out. Then we get 2 pages where I have no idea what the hell is happening. But throughout Forever Evil Blight, there's been this thing of magic people being stolen. And I think it has something to do with that, where we see 2 figures, 2 shadowy figures, one of them in control. The other one is just kind of snarky about the whole thing. And they walk through this portal, and the one in control is just like, oh, you better not be too snarky with me, boy, or else I'll put you in the project. What happened to the Justice League was a mercy compared to what I have planned. And as we go through this portal, we see this giant machine that is doing something to Sargon. It's got her like chained up, and it looks like she's either being drained of her magic or she is being like magic funneled into her. Hard to say, but that's literally all we get. So the group then teleports out like half a mile away. Like they're still in Central Park. The Sins are immediately on their ass. And Nightmare Nurse is like, hey, did anyone hear anything about like a machine and Sargon or anything when we were teleporting? And everyone's like, no, what are you talking about? So at that point, Phantom Stranger's like, hey, everyone, before Blight comes and attacks again, just so you all know, the human form is a kid that I pulled out of heaven, so please don't kill him. I think I can save him again. And everyone's like, look, we're going to do our best, but we're going to stay alive. So at that point, the fight continues on. We see Blight making a direct attack on Constantine. He uses some business card to do some magic, and it throws Blight down to the ground, which immediately Swamp Thing and Nightmare Nurse use their powers to try to hold him down, while Pandora holds off all the Sins from attacking. So Phantom Stranger comes up, just being like, okay, hold on. Hey, Chris. Hey, buddy, you in there? You wanna not be evil right now? And he just doesn't do anything like magically, just tries to talk to him. And of course, Blight then gets control back again, manages to use his magic to just blow everybody away. Constantine does his best to fight against, but he's also fighting against the Sins as well. And again, in his head is just, God, Zatanna, you always said that we'd find a way. You said things would be okay, but I don't think things are going to be okay, Zatanna. So at that point, he looks around. His entire team is basically knocked out. Swamp Thing's literally ripped in half. Nightmare Nurse is like blowing up halfway around the park. And as Constantine looks up and around, sees Blight coming down to attack him, he's like, well, Zatanna always said we'd find a way, but I'm not sure there's a way out of this, as he's about to be jumped. So yeah, it's a pretty brief issue, all things considered. Not a lot happens in it, and I think that's actually to its detriment. Usually I'm down for a good fight scene, but I don't know. This one just felt like we're going to pick up next time in Pandora, and I feel like the fight's still going to be going on. Like, I don't feel like this issue really accomplished anything, you know? Theoretically, this should be the issue that shows, A, Blight is in the real world, and B, just how strong he is even in the real world. But I don't feel like we got that, you know? I feel like the fight's still continuing. Out on top of it, I don't know who was doing the main pages of the art. There was a little cutaway there, specifically when they pinned down Blight, where they went to the secondary artist. The main art is just not my style. It's, I just, very thick outlines, very like heavy with the brush strokes. Not for me, not a fan. I was a much bigger fan of the secondary art style, but hey, what are you going to do? I don't hold it against the book that much. But no, even with the plot, it just seems like it seems like because this book is taking place over 4 separate books, like this event is spread over 4 separate books, that no book individually can do too much because they don't want it to be completely unreadable for people only picking up one of the books, which it's just slowing everything down, you know? By the end of this is going to be like, I think a 16-part event of like spread over all the books. It's too much. It's just a bit too, especially if this is how slowly paced some of these fight scenes are going to be. It's just too much. So overall, I'm going to give this one just a flat 6. It's not that I dislike a lot of the issue independently, but just how it represents the larger event as a whole. Because we're not even, I don't think we're even halfway through. I don't think we're even a quarter of the way through. And it's already slowing down this much. It's got to figure out its pacing problems real quick if it wants me to stay engaged. Justice League 3000 number 1, written by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis, art by Howard Porter. So I think the title pretty much gives it away, but it is Justice League in the future. They say early in the 31st century. So it's a completely different continuity, I guess you could say, but it is just its own thing. So we open up in 21st century where a narration tells us, okay, things were good for a really long time. Like, yes, there was still suffering in the world and some people were struggling, but like, we got rid of like poverty and hunger and disease. Like, things were really awesome. However, 10 years ago, the Five came. And as soon as that happened, it was just everything went to trash. The whole universe. Across 1,000 worlds, the Five took power. And we're introduced to this woman named Ariel Masters, who is currently on the run because she's part of a resistance against the Five and whatever they call. It's called the New Cosmic Order. And we see her, she's got some materials and guns and stuff. And all of a sudden there's a knock on her door, and it's the police. She's under arrest for defying the Five. And so she chops, and it's called The Project. I don't know if that's the police or if that's the entire, like, new order going on. But regardless, she busts out a window. She does a whole routine of, like, getting out of there. And she does have a suit. It's called an H suit that can camouflage and like mess with their sensors. She turns that on and she's like, I don't want to do this because they'll know I'll have an H suit next time, but I will be able to escape this time. So she manages to hide and says, well, I could blame the project. I could blame the twins, but all of this is because of me. So then we go to a planet called Cadmus World, and it's got a whole bunch of technological stuff, and I'm going to skip the joke that they put at the end of this issue. It's the Wonder Twins. We're introduced to two twins who are incredibly smart, who are running this project, and it's spread over the course of the whole issue, but apparently their mentor was Ariel Masters, and Ariel had this idea of, we could take this genetic material that we've had on ice for a millennium of the Justice League and essentially reform it and make a new Justice League in order to take on the Five. And Ariel didn't go through with it because she saw there were numerous problems, but then she was kicked off or left or something, and these twins named Terry and Terry, they were put in charge of the project, and they decided to go full steam ahead, and they essentially cloned the original Justice League. And we see that the boy Terry is very like, yeah, they can do it. They're the Justice League, and we never fail. We're the Wonder Twins. Whereas the girl Terry is a lot more skeptic and is like, no, like, there's a reason she didn't go forward with it, and there's still major problems with our Justice League. And we get to see what those problems are. So, again, Superman, Batman, Green Lantern, Flash, Wonder Woman. That's the lineup. However, all of them are clones. All of them know they are clones. And they all have very different personalities because while they have the genetic material the same, their personalities were essentially based off of how people remember them 1,000 years later. So we see, like, they're in the middle of a fight against a couple hundred things controlled by an alien intelligence called the Convert. And we see Batman is like down, locked and loaded, and he's like, oh yeah, we've got this under control. We can handle this. This is Justice League. And Superman is very, very cocky, and he's like, oh yeah, Superman will handle this. And Batman's like, I swear to God, put me down. Get me out of your arms now. I hate you so much. And Superman's like, I hate you too, Batman. We are rivals and enemies. And Superman is just like, 100% drinking his own Kool-Aid. Meanwhile, we see Flash is talking to Green Lantern, and Green Lantern is like kind of the same, but he apparently gets his power not from a ring, but from this cloak that he wears that imitates the Green Lantern abilities. Meanwhile, Flash is like 100% pessimistic. He's like, yeah, no, we're just clones, and like, we're not even real. Like, everything's just fake. Everything's so fake around us. And Green Lantern's like, Jesus Christ, kid. Like, I thought you'd be the worst, but actually Wonder Woman's the worst. Turns out she is just killing machine. She is 100% Amazonian, and she's just smashing and murdering everybody around her. So, yeah. Then everyone has, like, half memories. Everyone is half aware of like, no, I vaguely remember this being different, but I also can't remember specifics about my own life. So the fight continues on. Again, Superman's just 100% drinking his own Kool-Aid and arguing with Batman the whole time. In fact, one point, Batman is just like, Green Lantern tells him like, hey, you might not want to argue so much. He's Superman, you know? And Batman's like, yeah, how could I forget? He keeps on reminding us. So at that point, there's only one convert left. And he's just like, oh, we are but one convert. We are all converts. We've come for your surrender. And the Justice League is like, I'm sorry, you do understand you're the only one left standing, right? And he's like, for now, but we heard about your heroes. You are compassionate. You will not kill. And then Wonder Woman just throws something at his head and immediately kills him. And Flash is like, hey, we were kind of hoping to interrogate him. Shouldn't we have left him alive? And he's just like, yeah, but he's the enemy. I was like, right, but we were getting information out of him. And she's like, yeah, but he's the enemy. It's like, all right, great. So Superman and Batman continue arguing with each other until they are literally about to throw punches at each other. Wonder Twins call him back to base, just being like, all right, all of you come back. Jesus Christ, this was a mess. So they go through a portal. And the Wonder Twins, again, continue arguing. Same sort of stuff I was saying before about, like, is this a good idea? Like, they're supposed to take on the Five, but they are literally infighting at this point. And it's just like, yeah, but that's all just kinks we can work out, says Male Terry. Female Terry's like, look, I don't like it, but if this is the only option we have, I'm willing to at least give it a shot, okay? But, like, we take this slow, we take this at my pace, and we make sure that everything goes according to plan. And we see like some interviews with the team members as they're talking to like other team members. And everyone's basically just like, oh yeah, no, this is going to hell. Like none of this is going to work out. This is all garbage. I don't even understand why they brought us back. Like none of this is going to do well. And then you see Superman and Batman once again arguing at each other in their own testimonials. So the Wonder Twins say like, all right, look, we'll do what we have to. We'll make this work. But I mean, how bad could it really get? And our final shot is Superman literally about to punch Batman in the face and the rest of the Justice League holding him back. So, yeah, good intro to the team. It's a very different dynamic. It's showing, you know, here's a team. They hate each other. And how are they going to be able to come together in order to actually fight evil? I do think this is a thing that Keith Giffen and DeMatteis like, because they wrote Larfleeze, and I think one of them had a hand in that Threshold book that came out. They enjoy doing this. These flawed heroes that are like not even heroes, really. They're just anti-heroes. So, yeah, I mean, I'm down for it. It's an interesting concept at the very least. And not being held back by a like they're set in the future. They can do whatever they want. They can completely destroy the world. It's not going to matter because it can just be overwritten. So they're not held back by continuity. I'd like to see how far this can really be taken. Beyond that, it was a okay enough first issue. I do think it went a little bit too long on the whole Wonder Twins just recapping over and over saying like, oh, but they're the Justice League. And the other one being like, but they suck. I'd say it's probably a 7.5. I enjoyed it, but I think I enjoyed it more in concept than I did execution. It does have a lot more it can pull out of it, and I want to see what it does with it, but it's got to earn it. So yeah, 7.5 for now. Katana number 10, written by Ann Nocenti, art by Cliff Richards and Alex Sanchez. This is the final issue. And do you think they're going to wrap up all their plots? No. Anyway, last issue, I think it ended with Mona Shard, this little girl possessed by a ghost, lunging after Katana, saying, I dare you to kill this little girl. And then this issue just picks up with Shun the Untouchable, who's currently wearing makeup to hide her tattoos. She's making a flower delivery to a Dagger Clan hideout, and immediately she gets in, shows that the flower delivery is actually a gun, and she's like, it's a Sword Clan hideout. She's like, oh, you all tattooed my bodies. You're responsible for this. And so I'm here to exact my revenge. And all of you say, never bring a gun to a sword fight. Here's my gun. Good luck with that. And she's literally firing upon all of them. And like, none of them die. Like, they're all just fine because she's like, oh, I have a special request for you for who you need to contact and tell like that I'm coming for him. So she's firing on these people with a gun, and they're all just cool. So then we cut back to Katana, and she's kind of like shell-shocked. She's like, what? Where am I? What's going on? And she thinks back, and she's like, right, I was in a toy store, and then Mona Shard was there, and she lunged after me, and I didn't kill her. I wasn't able to kill a child. And also, Sickle, he knew that Mona was a child and yet sent me after her to kill her, and that's just unforgivable for me. There's no way that I could ever be in a relationship with Sickle because my dead husband's always going to come between us. So at that point, the police show up, and she's like, police? Jesus, they were fast. Wait a minute, hold on. How long was I out? So at that point, we see, what's his name? Junko, the drunk. Turns out he's an undercover cop, and he's like, Katana, we got to get you out of here. And she's like, what? Hold on, you're a cop? And he's like, yeah, I was deep undercover. We were trying to figure out stuff about like the Dagger Clan and the Sword Clan because they were, too high and mighty. They were working on stuff underground that was not okay. And then it was just a happy accident that you stumbled into my life and I was able to work with you. Meanwhile, this magic falcon's flying around them constantly. I swear to God, I'm giving you as much information as I have, but like it barely makes any sense to me either. So at that point, Junko's like, yeah, okay, don't worry about the Sword Clan stuff. Like, that'll just wrap itself up. We're dealing with that. You need to deal with the Ghost Warriors. Remember when the ghosts escaped from your broken sword? You got to go deal with them. And she's like, right, cool, awesome. And then an apple rolls in front of her, and she picks it up and says, I'm hungry. Does it come back? No, but it happens. So at that point, she remembers, oh, right, Shun was around. She was a sniper. I need to figure out where she's gone. So help me out finding her. So we see Shun is using the flower delivery stuff to get to where I believe Sickle is, if I'm correct. I don't know. So he's going to some place where there's a Sword Clan hideout and just like, it's Coil. Going to Coil. And is like, okay, I'm coming here. I'm going to kill him because Coil was the one who actually like instructed the tattoo people on what to tattoo onto my body. So he's the one who must pay the most. Then we see the sumo wrestler who is possessed by a ghost is making other sumo wrestlers make him a weapon of a very strong lance. And he says, I will kill the Soul Taker sword's owner and blah, blah, blah. And apparently he sees himself as a envoy of war. And you can't kill war. So then Katana meets up with the Falcon guy. And the Falcon's flying around and like swooping at her. And the Falcon's like, hey, you gotta like attack the bird. Like try to swing your sword at the bird. And she's like, I'm not going to be able to hit that. And just be like, well, do it anyway. And it makes some sort of like comparison to swinging at a bullet. I don't know. It barely makes sense. So at that point, Coil sneaks up on Shun and she turns around and just unloads gunfire on him. This time it actually does damage to him. She shoots him between the legs and she says, hey, I brought my own tattoo gun and I've thought a long time about what I'm going to tattoo on your corpse. And I've decided upon the word liar because you're a liar. You suck, Coil. And then Katana shows up and says, hey, wait a minute, Shun, don't shoot him. That's not what you need to do. He's apparently has nothing to do with the fact that she doesn't want Coil dead, like out of morals or ethics. It's because she wants to know why Coil tattooed Katana onto Shun's body. So Shun says, no, I have to do this. And she starts unloading on Katana. Katana manages to literally swing through the bullets because of her training with the Falcon. And then she lodges her sword inside of Shun's gun. Shun still tries to fire it. It backfires. And then Katana pushes her out of the way, saving her life. Then the sumo wrestler shows up and says, Katana, I am here for you. And the crazy-ass falcon bird that had this glow around it the whole time swings down, and turns out it is possessed with Masayo's soul. So the falcon's lets go of Masayo's soul. It goes into the sumo wrestler's body, freezes him long enough for Katana to plunge her sword inside of him, and not only capture the sumo wrestler's soul, like the war soul, but also Masayo. And so Shun's like, my God, your husband died for you again. That is such an intense love. I can't imagine it. And Junko, who's now just there, is like, what will you do now, Katana? And she says, oh, well, the Creeper and Mona Shard are still out there, so I guess I'll take care of them. And then it says the end. Oh my God, I hated this book from beginning to end. Just everything about it was incomprehensible. It felt like there was never any sort of focus. And like, even by the time we hit this final issue, like every page is just something totally different. We just keep on jumping to something totally separate. Of like, oh, now she's fighting a bird. Now this sumo wrestler's making a weapon. Now we're seeing Shun take on a gun in order to kill Coil. And it's like, the moment that, like, Coil's not even taken care of. I don't even know what happened to Coil. He's just, like, bleeding out in a corner. Oh, my God. I hated this. 3.5. And it's, like, the art's fine. The art's okay. And at least we've set up a few plots that we did actually wrap up. But, like, the fact that Masao's soul was just in a bird and then just randomly swooped down and got captured again, it's like, why? Why would you do that? No, the more I think about it, the lower the score's getting. So I'll keep it at a 3. It's at a 3. But just know if I kept it being able to just pick on every single issue, this would hit a 0 eventually. God, this series was awful. Do not read. Batman number 26, written by Scott Snyder, art by Greg Capullo. So last issue, Bruce went to go talk to Lucius Fawkes about his former co-worker, who was Dr. Death, and then Lucius jabbed Bruce in the neck, seemingly working with Dr. Death. So this issue picks up, well, first we get a little tease at the beginning, where apparently Bruce snuck out to the movies, and junior cop James Gordon decides to arrest him playing truant officer. But then we cut back to the story where Bruce is coming to, and as he sits up, he sees that Dr. Death is basically strangling Lucius, and Lucius is like, wait, no, you don't have to do this. And it seems that he's about to be injected with whatever was actually meant for Bruce. So Dr. Death leans in, he's just like, oh yeah, you know, the most smallest bone in the body is the stirrup. It's in the ear. It's such a crazy feeling to feel that grow. So he's injecting this thing, or he's about to inject it into Lucius's ear, and then all of a sudden Bruce gets up, smacks Dr. Death in the arm, and he sees, like, in real time, the bones in his arms start to, like, grow. So Bruce is smacked aside, and Lucius is like, oh, Bruce, you gotta run, you gotta get out of here. And that's the first time that I guess Dr. Death realizes, like, wait a minute, hold on, that's Bruce Wayne? Oh, that's too good. So at that point, we see Dr. Death take Lucius and like chain him up by the neck and starts hoisting him up, at which point Bruce leaps into action to try to distract Dr. Death. He throws his belt to make a noise down in like a wind turbine tunnel or something like that. And as he makes his way in, Bruce closes the door behind him, presses a button, and the wind turbine turns on, and it's got the force of like a jet engine, so it just blasts Dr. Death against the wall hard. So Bruce lets Lucius down. Lucius informs him, like, hey, sorry I had to play along there, but, like, I gave you the vaccine rather than the thing itself, so I'm hoping that'll work for you. But either way, we got to get out of here. We got to stop it. So they start trying to make their way out the door. They know Dr. Death's on their heels, and as they reach this final lock that Lucius is scrambling for the keys for, Dr. Death catches up, and now, because he was slammed against his back so hard against the wall, his back is just huge bony protrusions. He looks like a true monster here. And he grabs Bruce by the head and just starts crushing his skull in his hands. And he's like, well, how old are you? Like 25? Like, that's the exact age where the skull finally hardens up. It's no longer like malleable. However, there are still seam lines that can be crushed. And you start hearing this cracking noise inside of his skull. And it's at that point that Dr. Death takes a bullet to the back. Turns out Jim Gordon showed up and he's like, hey, put your hands in the air. You got to the count of 3. Dr. Death, of course, doesn't wait. He jumps out the window and leaves Bruce with some severe brain trauma, bleeding on the floor. So it's at this point that we see what I guess is Bruce's memory, dream, something like that. He's inside of a iron ball that's dangling over a huge pit, and it's opened up by a man with some keys. It seems that he's a prisoner, and he's handed a phone and says, "Your father is on the phone." And through the phone, a voice says, "Bruce, Bruce, please talk to me. Bruce, are you there?" And it doesn't seem that Bruce answers. So we then see Bruce wake up. He's in a hospital. Alfred's by his side. And Bruce is like, "Oh, geez, how long have I been out?" And Alfred's like, "Oh, a better part of a day. But like, you have brain trauma. You need to stay here." And Bruce is like, "I can't. Do you have my formal wear?" And Alfred's like, "Let me reiterate. You have brain trauma, dude. You need to stay here." And as Bruce tries to get out of the bed, he sees that he's actually handcuffed to it. And that's when Jim Gordon turns the corner and he's like, "Look, here's the thing. I just need to talk to you, Mr. Wayne. I didn't want you running off before we had a chance to." And Bruce is like, "I don't trust you, man. Regardless of what you want, regardless of if you think we're on the same side here, because you know I'm going after Dr. Death, even if I am just a citizen, I don't trust you." And he's like, "What? What did I do to you?" And he recounts the day that Jim took him in as, a truant officer. But as he's riding in the back of this cop car, the cop that he's partnered with, who is, what's his name? Dan Corrigan. Dan keeps on going inside of these businesses. And he keeps on walking in and keeps on walking out with, like, things. And he's like, Bruce asks, "Why do we keep on stopping?" And Jim's like, "Oh, well, we're protecting people, and we like to go in and make sure that people feel safe, and we're just checking in on them." And Bruce is like, "Oh, I feel so happy. I would love to give you a gift." And we see that as he's leaving this tailor shop, Dan is carrying a new trench coat, which is the same trench coat that Jim Gordon wears to this day. And Bruce points out, like, "I didn't know back then, but now I do. You and your partner were essentially racketeering. You were shaking down those shops and asking for protection money, and you got gifts out of it because that's the only way they could afford it. You are a dirty cop, Jim Gordon, and I will never, ever trust you." And at that point, he snaps out of the handcuffs, and he even says, like, "And don't forget, like, that night you delivered me back home, but my parents wanted me to be able to see the movie that I was seeing the whole way through, so they brought me to the theater. So the last thing I saw that night was this." And he takes Gordon's gun and, like, holds it out to his face, saying, "Yeah, that was the night my parents died." So he hands back the gun to Gordon and says, like, "Look, you can arrest me if you want, if you have anything on me, but I am never, ever going to trust you, and you can rot in that coat that you wear." So Bruce walks off with Alfred. Gordon's approached by a beat cop who says, "Hey, we got a message from the Riddler. This is just a copy of it, but you should see what it says." So later that day, Batman's going out onto the water. Turns out that there is a weather center that he wants to investigate because that has some of the last scientists that worked with Dr. Death. And the storm is coming down as well, the storm that's always been teased throughout Zero Year. And as he gets there, he sees one of the scientists sitting there, turns him around in his chair. He's already been infected. He screams out for help. And as his bones start growing rapidly, there's nothing he can do. But all of a sudden the lights turn on and we see the commissioner is there along with a few other cops who say, like, "Hey, Batman, whatever you did to these people, put your hands in the air." And he's like, "Wait, you got it all wrong." And he's like, "No, I don't think we do. Open fire." And the cops all start firing at Batman, and we see blood dripping to the ground. So Batman's dead. And I do think that next issue might be a little bit of an extra long one. I know it is for Detective Comics because that's Detective 27, and they love their extra long comics for Detective 27s. But I think Batman might get a little bit extra as well. We'll see about that. Regardless, it's a fine issue. It's good enough. I think the center point, the main focus of it is this idea of why doesn't Bruce trust Jim? And we finally get the backstory to that. It's a change. It's a hard change. I mean, I vaguely remember there being something that redeems Jim by the end, but yeah, no, it's interesting to see Batman be like so anti-cop to the level of like, no, even Jim Gordon, the shining example, is like beneath him. There's no way that he's ever going to trust him. Yeah, no, it's perfectly good. I think it's doing a great job of setting up Dr. Death as this monstrous villain who is just beyond help, beyond saving, and is actually very dangerous based off what he's doing. All in all, I'll give it an 8. I enjoyed it. I do think there are some weird bits to it. I think that the cutaway to that prison thing, unless we're going to get more on that later on, it just seems a bit strange. But I'm not totally out of it. So yeah, 8. Batgirl number 26, written by Gail Simone, art by Daniel Sampere. This is kind of the end of the arc of Batgirl Wanted, and last issue, Nightfall sent literally every single Batgirl villain after Jim Gordon because he thinks that she's behind stuff. So gotta have her killed. And also Barbara's gonna put back on the Batgirl suit in order to save him. So we are at Commissioner Gordon's brownstone, and inside they're just like, okay, we're gonna kill him, but we got to make it look like a mob thing. We can't make it look like a superhero thing. So we're going to like cut off some fingers and like torture him a little bit. And sorry, Commissioner, that's just the way things got to be. And he's like, go to hell. And he's like, that's the spirit. So they've about to take some garden shears to one of his fingers when all of a sudden Batgirl, full costume, busts in through the window and everyone freaks out like, oh, Christ, it's Batgirl. So because she's on her motorcycle, she's like, I should be pulling the brakes, but you know what? I want to hurt somebody. And she just goes full throttle into, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to remember any of these people's names, but like the big strong one. So immediately, like one by one, each of the villains just be like, it's Batgirl, we have to stop her. And like Gretel pulls a gun. Batgirl just lodges some batarangs into her arm. She takes her father and runs upstairs where they run into the Mirror, and Mirror's like, oh, you are both on my list. And Batgirl just throws a batarang at his face, shattering his face shield, and just be like, oh man, screw your goddamn list. Also, by the way, that's a concussive one as it explodes and shatters his mirror. So at this point, Batgirl hands her dad a belt, like a utility belt, saying like, hey, everything you need's in here, you just got to be willing to use it. And he's just like, I have no idea how to use this thing. Look, if you want me to do this, I need some reason to trust you. And Batgirl just thinks back to her boyfriend who was shot and now comatose in the hospital, and she's like, oh, well, give me one reason I should trust you. Yeah, no, we're in the same boat here, but we both got to make it out of this alive. So at that point, Bonebreaker, that was her name, calls into Nightfall being like, hey, Batgirl's here. What do we do? And she's just like, what are you talking about? This is a perfect thing. Kill Jim Gordon and then frame it so that Batgirl looks like she did it. She already lodged some batarangs in your arm, right? Just lay those on Jim Gordon's body. Open and shut case. So at that point, Jim's like, look, if you want me to help, if you want to like work together, I need to get down into my footlocker down in the basement. So help me get down there. So they head down. We see that all the villains are like readying themselves at the top of the basement. They're like, look, they're going to hold out down there. They're going to hide down there. So we're going to have to go down there and get them. So everyone pile up. Everyone is able to walk at this point. And then apparently, whatever the name of the last guy is, Nightfall calls him Michael. He's outside the house. He's the one keeping watch on everything. And Nightfall's like, look, if things go sour, I want you to burn that house to the ground. Everyone inside of it. You don't worry about it. And she's like, all right, fair enough. So Batgirl pulls out all of her batarangs. She's ready to go. And Gordon, he opens up his footlocker and he's like, yeah, you forget I once was a beat cop and they gave me a gun, which I'm pretty sure you have to return that stuff. But for some reason, Gordon has it here. So Batgirl reasons out. She reasons out that all of the villains are expecting that they're going to have to come down and get Batgirl. They never expected a surprise attack coming up. So she uses all of her concussive batarangs to cause a massive explosion, takes the villains off guard, and just starts attacking all of them. And because this is a hallway fight scene, she's able to use their own weapons against each other. And, tight quarters is essentially bad news for them. So Gordon busts out through the back wall, whatever. He finds Michael is about to burn the place down because things are going south, and he uses his billy club to knock out Michael, take him down, and then set up a portable bat signal saying like, hey, the guy who gave me this isn't exactly cool with me right now, and I'm not cool with him, but like this is important. So he lights up the bat signal. And as Batgirl is just 100% beating the ever-loving crap out of everyone inside, Bonebreaker gets back on the phone just being like, hey, we're losing. Can we leave? And at that point, he's just like, all right, yeah, fair enough. Go ahead, pull out. So Batgirl's like about to throw a punch. Bonebreaker's like, whoa, hold on there. We're leaving. We're going to go now. Goodbye. And she's like, what? No, I'm not going to. You think I'm just going to stop and let you leave? And she's just like, kid, you earned your win tonight. We're kind of impressed. Take it. Take your win. Goodbye. And so all of them just leave, taking the unconscious bodies of the people Batgirl knocked out, and they just leave. So at that point, you hear sirens coming, and Batgirl's trying to get her bike up, and she's like, hey, I got to go. Sorry about the mess. And then Jim holds a gun to the back of her head and says, Batgirl, you're under arrest for the death of James Gordon Jr. And Batgirl's like, I saved your life tonight, dude. Is that not enough? And he's like, I'm grateful, but you killed my son. And she's like, do you not remember what happened that night? And he's like, yeah, I do. You shoved a batarang into my son's eye, and then he fell over the pier and died. Like, no one could have survived that. And she reasons out, like, you do, like, are you forgetting the before part? Your son had your wife at gunpoint, or knife point, I should say, was going to kill her. He sledgehammered me and I was concussed. Like, you know exactly what happened. Why? Why are you doing this? And he's just like, you committed murder. Like, that's, regardless of if it's for a good reason or not, the bats are not supposed to kill. That changes everything. You can't just be okay with that. And she's basically says, like, look, if you truly believe that I had any other choice in that situation to save your wife's life, if you think there was any other option, then shoot me. Shoot me now. Because otherwise, I'm going to leave. And she brings up that he shot her boyfriend as well. And Jim's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kill the boyfriend. I mean, whatever. And she's like, you know what? No more secrets. And she starts to take off her cowl. Jim looks away and is just like, no, I don't want to know. I don't want any part of that. And she's just like, an internal monologue. She's like, I'm willing to share this with him. And he can't do it. He at least doesn't think I'm a murderer anymore. He's willing to let me go. But it's just, I can't open up to him. I can't show who I really am. So she puts back on the cowl, hops on the motorcycle and drives away. And then back with Nightfall, we see her meeting up with James Gordon Jr. saying, oh, you were free from the Suicide Squad, huh? And just like, oh, yeah, I can get out of there easy. So, yeah, Gordon Jr. is with Nightfall now. So as Batgirl's riding home, she's super upset, but then she gets a call from whatever his name, the boyfriend's mom, saying, hey, it's a miracle. He just came out of his coma. And so at that point, Batgirl says, oh, and there it is, the thing I thought I lost, hope. So that's the issue. Preface everything, I enjoyed it. I think it was a decently well-written issue. I think it was decently well-paced. It's a perfectly fine issue. I just feel like everything was building to this. Like, we brought back all the old villains. We brought back all this stuff. This feels like the capper to a run. And in the final pages, I just didn't get that. It didn't quite hit as hard as I really wanted it to hit. It had a good setup. It had this whole thing of like, Batgirl and Jim just like talking it out and saying like, is there any other option? Was there anything else I could do? I liked all that. But once it got to like her taking off the cowl, and then we see James Gordon Jr. meeting up with Nightfall, and then we see, what's his name, coming out of a coma. Like, all of that just felt a little bit too hollow for me. It didn't have that emotional punch. And I know this isn't the end of the run. So, there's no reason I should have, but it feels like it was building up to something like that this whole way through. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like a 7.5. It's great. It's doing great work, but like, I don't know, something about the end of it just like rang a little bit hollow to me. And I just wanted a little bit more. Not that it's bad. It just could have been so much more. Nightwing number 26, written by Kyle Higgins, art by Will Conrad and Cliff Richards. So, basically a whole new plot, but we are still in Chicago. We open up at a medical center, and Nightwing is telling us about this new element that was found called canium, and it's being used in this medical research stuff, and apparently it's an antipsychotic, but it's like super rare and barely any medical places have it. However, all the medical places that do have it have been robbed of it very recently, until finally there's just one left, which is this medical center we're opening up with. So we see a doctor picking up her prescription, and he's talking to the pharmacist and just like, oh, hey, where's Danielle today? And the pharmacist is like, oh, she got sick. So sucks getting sick when you work at a hospital, right? But tis. So the doctor walks away saying, oh, yeah, give my best to Danielle. And we see the pharmacist has Danielle bound and gagged behind the counter. And so she takes Danielle's security card and says, all right, hey, it's almost over. Just stay right there. And she goes back. She takes all the canium or whatever out of the vault, I guess you would call it. And Nightwing says well, because people have been stolen, they've upped security. So there's no way she'd be able to leave out the front door. So I'm real curious to see how she's going to do this. And Nightwing sees that, or she goes out up the stairs to the roof, and Nightwing's like, and that's what I'm counting on, that she's got a creative exit. And he meets her up on the roof saying hey, rooftop getaway. Kind of sucks that I have to interrupt it because I really would have liked to see it. And then she just takes off. She starts running. And as she turns the corner, she sheds the wig and lab coat she was wearing, and Nightwing recognizes her. Turns out it's Mal. And if you don't remember, Mally. And if you don't remember who she was with Johnny Spade in the last arc, and she was talking to herself constantly. She has essentially some form of schizophrenia. And we see her doing a full cat burglar routine where she's jumping off of rooftops and she's landing on other ones. And she was called Mally the Mimic. And we see that basically as Nightwing's getting chased to her, she's watching his moves and is able to duplicate it near immediately. And Nightwing's like, okay, I get it. That's why she's a mimic. All right, whatever. So as she does one final jump, Nightwing manages to, he gets kicked in the face. And then she says, by the way, it's not Mally the Mimic anymore. Now I go by the name Marionette. To which Nightwing's like, cool. And as she jumps, he throws it's not a batarang, obviously, because it's Nightwing, but I don't have a better name. So batarang at her bag and manages to make it fall down onto the rooftop between them, where Nightwing's able to get to it first. So she doesn't have access to the drugs. So at that point, Nightwing heads back home, just being like, all right, well, after everything that happened in the last arc, I managed to convince my roommates that maybe we should get a 3-bedroom apartment to make it easier for me to sneak in. And as he struggles with the window, he finds that it's been locked. And he's like, oh, geez, are you kidding me? So he goes up to the roof. He gets his emergency clothes. He comes back down. And his roommate's like, oh, hey, you're up early. I didn't even know you left. And he's just like, yeah, totally. Hey, did you lock my window? By the way, did you go into my room? I left it open for a reason. She's like, yeah, I turned on the heat. I'm not about to waste heat because you want to have a little bit of a breeze when you're not here. And Nightwing's like, right. Totally. Thanks. And then we see the roommate also introduces this other girl who's there named Jen. She's a younger girl and is just apparently staying there on holiday because her mom works or something like that. We don't get a lot from her, but it does look like every time that Dick tries to make some sort of an excuse of hey, did you go in my room or whatnot? Jen's kind of gives a smirk, kind of oh, geez, this guy, huh? He's the worst roommate ever. So then we go back to Marionette. She's making her way into her own place. And as soon as she gets in, she's grabbed by 2 guys. And this guy says hey, you owe us money. Turns out that we know you're some sort of junkie because you got all these syringes here. So we're going to flush this all down the trash and make you watch. And she's like, no, you can't do that. And she fights against them, manages to crush one guy's windpipe and break another guy's arm. And then all of a sudden police are at the door. And she puts on a very convincing voice performance of oh, please help me. And then another voice she switches to is got them all, slice off their fingers or whatnot. And we see as she scrambles to get one of these syringes, she injects it into her arm and escapes out the window as it seems to hit her pretty well. So At that point, we cut to Dick's new job. He's now working at a police bar, and all the cops come here and after work and talk, and his other roommate's just like, yeah, no, I got you this gig. It's real great. You'd be surprised the sort of things that the cops talk about and you could pick up around here. And Dick's like, I'm sure I will be. And then that one cop, Maxwell Morgan, who's, giving his other roommate a whole bunch of leads and whatnot, he comes in and he's basically like, yeah, we got this hit on this costume girl. She managed to break in and steal a bunch of the canium drugs, and we don't have anything else on her. And just like, okay, well, how do you know that she was in a costume? And Maxwell just like gives him a look and then basically walks out saying like, well, as long, print the story, see what you get. And Dick kind of questions that, being like, what was with the look? And he's like, yeah, he's kind of got this real thing for costume people. He really hates them. So if there's any sort of major crime or anything that he can turn into a costume thing, he tells me to print that story. And Dick's like, isn't that totally immoral and unethical? And he's like, yeah, well, I got to get a job, Dick. So at that point, we see later on Drexler Chemical, where there's a shipment of canium coming in, and Nightwing finds out about this and figures that Marionette would know about it as well. So as she breaks into the refrigeration unit, Nightwing's in there just being like, oh, we have to stop meeting like this. And we see Nightwing fighting against Marionette when all of a sudden a bunch of gunfire opens up, and Marionette's like, oh no, not him. And Nightwing says, not who, looks behind him. Turns out it's Mad Hatter, who has controlled a bunch of different people, including the detective and Michael, saying, oh, hey, please step away from her. She's my favorite Alice. So Marionette is part of Mad Hatter's thing, and she's an Alice, I guess. Sure. I like it. I like the reveal of this woman because we set her up before. We gave her a little bit of her own thing, and now she has become her own villain. It was a good setup payoff. My only thing is the Mad Hatter thing at the end. Like, I don't know. It just seems a bit too wanting to tell. Like, they're in Chicago. Mad Hatter should not be here, and I'm sure we'll get an explanation as to why he is here later, but it just seems like one of those things where editorial doesn't trust that we can engage with a villain that we don't already know. It has to be somebody who's already built up in the mythology. And I don't know. That seems a bit cheap to me. Beyond all that, it was a fine enough issue. It kind of just feels like a resetting the pieces sort of thing and seeing, okay, now we're starting a new arc. And let's see how Dick's now got this new job and they're living in this new apartment. There's this new person living with them. Like, it's just setting up new pieces for new exploration of the character. So overall, I'm going to give it a flat 7. It's good. It's not great. It's just above average. So I'll give it that, and we'll see what it does with the next issue. Superman Wonder Woman number 3, written by Charles Soule, art by Tony S. Daniels. So last issue, Superman took on Apollo because he was being a dick, and then we saw Zod manage to escape from the Phantom Zone. So this issue picks up with Cat Grant of ClarkCatropolis.com, still the stupidest website name in existence, getting a flash drive and looking inside of it, but we don't see what's on there. So then we cut to Superman, who's on the moon. And Batman calls him up saying, hey, man, you're on the moon. I got your signal. You flew around the Earth 300 times, and now you're on the moon. What's going on? And Superman's like, I don't know. Apollo blasted me with concentrated sun power, and I always thought I was at 100% power, but now I've got this extra boost, and I don't feel safe being down there. My hand feels like it's about to explode. And Batman's like, all right, look, we'll figure that out. But do you not know anything about how your powers work at all? Superman's like, I'm sorry. How many Kryptonians are there to talk to? Yeah, that's what I thought. And he's like, yeah, fair enough. So at that point, he puts forward well, why not talk to Wonder Woman? And she's like, what? No, she's the last person I want to see or want seeing me like this. So then we cut to what Wonder Woman's doing. It's Christmas time, and she's talking to one of her Amazonian friends who is also still out here named Hesia, and basically says, like, I don't know what to get him. I don't even know what Christmas is really all about. It's something he takes seriously, but, like, I don't get it. And she's like, no, here's the thing. You've told me enough about this guy. I know he doesn't like things. He likes experiences. He likes being able to spend time with people he cares about. So, yeah, just do that. So then we see Batman still talking to Superman, and Superman's just concerned of, like, oh yeah, no, like, she could have been killed because of Doomsday. And Batman's like, no, but, like, we all could die at any point. That's the whole thing of the Justice League. We put our lives on the line. He's like, yeah, but, like, Doomsday's my thing. I wouldn't want her dying because of my thing. And Batman's like, look, you know how I feel about you being in a relationship, but if you're in a relationship, you don't have a my thing anymore. You both share each other's things. That's what's going to happen. And he also points out, like, also, you keep on looking at yourself as, like, a human who just happens to have extraordinary powers. And that's why I think you're the best person who could have possibly been Superman. Because if it was like an alien, it could be a totally different shakeout. But you view yourself as human. She views herself as an Amazon first. Like, you can't view her the same way that you view yourself. She has a totally different upbringing. And at that point, there is a alert that there's something going on out in a desert of a possible interdimensional excursion. And Superman's like, hey, I'll go. I feel much calmer now. Thanks for talking to me, Bruce. You're a good friend. And he's like, yeah, okay, I'll send Diana on the way. So we cut over to North Africa, where Zod is there, covered in blood. He screams out. And as he starts walking through, one of the men that he killed says, Min Fadlak. I don't know what that means, but the words start picking up louder and louder and louder until he just starts stomping the guy's head into the ground. He sees a condor flying above his head, and so he jumps up, and he's like in the air with it. He doesn't know what's going on, but he realizes, oh, hey, I can fly. And as he's up there, he starts plummeting back down to Earth. But before he gets down, Martian Manhunter tackles him out of the air, just being like, hi, do you need any help? And then Zod just looks up, blasts him with heat vision, sends him flying up in the air. And Martian Manhunter's like, okay, he's not friendly, guys. And so then the Justice League of America shows up, in this case consisting of Steve Trevor, Hawkman, and Vibe, along with Martian Manhunter. And it's like, all right, what do we do? How should we take him out? And Vibe's like, I don't know, I'll just, we'll keep our distance. Vibe can go ahead and use his powers. So Vibe blasts him with a vibration thing. Zod's still just standing there taking it. And he's like, all right, Manhunter, you go, but, like, bring the heat. And he uses his heat vision on him and manages to encase him into solid glass because he melts the sand around him. So at that point, they're talking like, okay, he's contained. What do we do next? And then Zod just busts out of the glass because, of course, he does, and just starts unloading on Martian Manhunter's face. Hawkman comes up and hits him in the back of the head with a mace. Doesn't do anything but pisses him off. And that's the point where Wonder Woman comes up and entangles him inside her lasso of truth. And he's like, hey, Steve, how's it going? It's like, well, Diana, what's going on? So at that point, they're just like, hey, why was he attacking you? I was like, I don't know, because he's a dick. That's why. So at that point, they say, yeah, you know, Argus, he detected this people coming in. You know anything about what's going on? And that's when Zod finally speaks up and says, my name is Zod. And it's like, oh, hey, you know English. That's cool. He's like, yeah, sorry. I picked it up through watching through dimensional walls or whatnot. I'm sorry I attacked you. I was just spooked. I'm confused. I don't know what's going on. This is my first opportunity to speak to one of you. And he looks up at Superman and be like, you're wearing the crest of El. Are you any relation to Jor-El? You look so much like him. And Superman's like, oh, you're Kryptonian? You knew my father? And Steve Trevor's like, oh, Jesus Christ, we got another Kryptonian. And Diana's like, yeah, Superman, he's got this handled. You guys leave. And it's like, no, this guy is from another dimension or something. We need to take care of him. And he's just like, no, Superman's got this handled. Do not argue with us. And Superman's like, all right, yeah, I got him. Fine, just go, Steve. And he's like, what? Huh? Have you seen what he's capable of? He's like, I have him, Steve. Back off. So at that point, they take Zod and they bring him back to the fortress and basically put him into one of the zoo tanks. And he's just like, look, sorry, I'm hesitant of you. I want to believe you that you're cool, but like, I need to keep you contained for now. And Zod's like, I get it, no big deal, but hey, did you see a woman come through with me? Her name is Feora. Any sign of her? And it's like, no, we didn't get any other signs of anyone else, but we will keep our eyes peeled. Don't worry about that. He's like, cool, cool, great. Look forward to talking to you as soon as you can figure out what's going on. So at that point, Wonder Woman and Superman separate out. They go outside the fortress. And she's like, hey, I picked up a Christmas idea for you. I was going to wait for Christmas, but I guess we'll do it now. And he's like, you didn't have to get me anything. And she's like, I kind of didn't, but I did get you this. And she calls over the comm and says, Batman, do it now. And Batman says, all right, we're all in position. You're good. And Superman asks what's going on. And she's like, everyone else on the Justice League is going to work double time for at least a little while. They're going to take care of everything. You don't need to worry about saving the planet. You and me just have time for ourselves right now. So that's my gift. And he's like, thank you. That's so much. I mean, really. And so they start kissing. But all of a sudden, Superman picks up something in his super hearing. He hears everyone around the world saying, like, oh my God, Superman and Wonder Woman are a couple. And oh my God, this is how, like, the New World Order starts. And oh my God, they're so cute together. And Superman realizes they know. The whole world knows that we're a couple. So that's the end of the issue. I like this. I like this the whole way through. I think it does a great job. We've introduced Zod. And obviously we know as an audience who is aware of previous incarnations, Zod is awful. Zod is horrible. But I like the fact that they are taking this initial introduction and playing with it. They're saying, no. He doesn't know he's awful. And Zod is going to use that to his advantage. Or maybe it's not even an act. Maybe he is really, like, in this continuity trying to be better. But either way, I'm interested in the direction it takes. And then just the way they play out the relationship, it does a great job with it. It does feel natural. It does feel normal, the way that they're handling this. It doesn't just feel like, you know, a political marriage sort of thing where it's just, oh, we are together because we're the only ones who are part of the Justice League that could be that way. It feels like they have feelings for each other. So yeah, overall, I'm really digging this book. I'll give this issue an 8.5, honestly. The art is just really overselling it as well. Tony S. Daniels does a fantastic job. Got nothing more to say. It's just a great book. Superboy number 26, written by Frank Hanna and Marv Wolfman, art by Andre Guinaldo. It's a brand new Superboy. So for anyone who is not in the loop, there was a whole thing going on in Teen Titans number 26, and then the return of Krypton, or Krypton Returns, I can't remember the order, story arc in Superman, where essentially Superboy has been replaced by a far more evil Superboy from an alternate timeline. Just accept that, because that is the marching orders moving forward in this book. So we see this new Superboy who internally calls himself John. John is seeing a whole bunch of monsters surrounding him in like this huge purple field, and they like tentacles are probing his face and like spikes are pointing into his head. And finally he wakes up and he's like, "Wow, Jesus, what's going on?" And he sees this huge spiky one telling him like, "Oh, you're a killer. You were about to conquer the world. Why would someone want you dead?" And we see him, like there's a couple of eyes staring at him, and they're the ones who are clearly talking to him and just being like, "Oh, John, you have so much potential, but I need to see if you're able to live up to it. You have to kill these monsters, destroy them, and if you live, then you can find me." And he's basically just yells out like, "Shut up, I don't want to deal with you." And he starts like strangling these monsters in his mind, which turns out in real life is him strangling Wonder Girl, Cassie Sandsmark, as he's in a hospital bed and she was over top of him. And he's just like, "Hey, Superboy, it's me. It's Cassie. You're good." And of course she's calling him Khan because that's what she thinks he still is. And then we get the quick recap of everything that happened, which is there was an original timeline where this Superboy was raised by Harvest before Harvest became Harvest, and then he had some sort of crippling disease, so they made another Superboy. That was Khan, in order to try to cure the disease, basically just be an organ farm. It didn't work out. There was a whole thing where Harvest went back in time and did all this stuff, but now the Teen Titans are in the distant future, and they have brought this Superboy along thinking that he is Khan, and he's just going to continue to keep up the act. So, well, I say that. He says he's going to keep up the act, but then he's just like, "But I really like killing. So I'm just going to go ahead and start killing all the Teen Titans, starting with this girl, and just throws her against the wall. And she's like, okay, I don't know what's going on, but I will fight back against you, whatever's controlling you. And so she kicks him in the head. He immediately gets up and starts strangling her again. And he's just like, oh, that's weird. My strength isn't at full peak. I'm not sure if I'm actually going to be able to kill her. I have limits here. And she gets down and she's like literally about to stab him because of what he's doing. And at that point, he's like, okay, I do have to bide my time. I have to wait till I get stronger. And he's just like, Cassie, is that you? And then all of a sudden, like, other police people come in. And again, remember, they're in the future. There's a whole Flash story going on in Teen Titans. And he's just like, no, it's me. I swear, I'm sorry. I don't know what was happening. And Cassie's like, prove it. And he's like, tell me how to prove it. I'll do whatever you want. And meanwhile, his internal monologue's just like, God, I want to crush your skull and see what comes out. So at that point, he starts getting woozy, like for real. And he's like, oh, okay, hold on. Something's going on. And he passes out again. And when he comes to, all of the Teen Titans are standing over him. And they're just like, hey, Con, what's going on? Why are you going on? And he's like, I don't know. I can't. The only thing I remember is Cassie literally kicking my ass. And Cassie's like, oh, yeah, he's all right. He's fine. So then one of the doctors is there saying like, hey, we took some samples from you. We're just running some preliminary tests now. I'd like to run some more tests if you could. It's just future tech. Just look into this little box thing. And he's just like, oh, well, I can't have them figuring out that much about me. So he uses his telekinetic ability to explode the box. And he's just like, oh, geez, is that supposed to happen? That doesn't seem very safe. She's like, that's literally never happened before. I don't know what's going on. And John's just like, okay, well, can I get some sleep, guys? I'm feeling a little bit woozy still. Tell me what's going on with Kid Flash. So everyone leaves, but Raven gives a look back like, something's going on with that kid. So immediately, as soon as they're out of the room, John sits up and he's like, all right, if they've already run some tests on me, I need to get rid of those results. So he puts his hand to the wall and uses his telekinetic ability to feel where the tests are and then just like immediately blows them up. Just like, all right, they're done with. But there are still some samples I need to deal with. So we need to go down to the genetics lab one floor down. And as he's making his way through the floor, he uses his telekinetic ability to push people out of the way, blow up the security cameras, and then bend the light around him so that he's functionally invisible. And as he gets down to the lower floor, he just walks past and he's like, oh, there are guards down here. What could they be guarding? A meta? I hate metas. I'm going to kill whatever meta I find down here. So he just walks through the door, and inside he sees this woman who has electricity powers. And she's just like, what? Who are you? What are you doing here? And he's like, whatever I got to do. And then just starts choking out this girl, just immediately starts strangling her. And he starts repeating all the words that Harvest put into his mind, just being like, oh, you metas, you used to save the world, but then you became like you started taking action before anything. And so the world became subject to your whims in order to try to make it a better place in your eyes. And that's why I have to kill all the metas. So yeah, that's what he does. So eventually he gets electrified, but like this body is completely burnt to a crisp. And he's like, oh, cool. I can feed off of the meta energy. I can absorb it into me. All the more reason to keep killing them. So then he turns on the computer and it requires an eye scan. So he holds up the corpse of this body to get its eye scan. And he's like, all right, report on John Kent. Say what's going on. And the report throws out, okay, the father's DNA is alien. It's Superman. And he's like, okay, well, what about the mother? And it's like, oh, well, the mother's DNA is multiple strands. All of them are meta. And he's like, oh, okay, John's got many moms. That's interesting. But then he's like, wait a minute, hold on. Tell me what you know about Khan. And he's like, oh, Khan, referred to as Superboy. They've got huge achievement list. Would you like to download it? And he's like, he probably led a pretty boring life. I don't care. Did he do like anything super special? And he's like, well, because we have all this time travel stuff, we can say his list of accomplishments, including future accomplishments, which is in approximately 1,000 years, Khan will be instrumental to forming the Legion of Superheroes. So at that point, he's like, oh, I'm taking the place of a guy who's going to form the Legion of Superheroes. Oh, this is a beautiful friendship. So, yeah. All right. Few questions. I'm not saying I dislike this. I actually think this is a much better pivot to the Superboy book than what it's been for like the past 25 issues. It actually gives this character focus and something to do and is like his own thing rather than just beholden to whatever other books are doing. Totally cool with that. Here's my thing. We're already in the distant future. So why is it saying 1,000 years from now he's going to make the Legion of Superheroes? Additionally, we've seen the Legion of Superheroes in this continuity. That's not how it plays. I'm so confused. Either way, whatever it's doing with it, I'm sure we'll get some level of answers. This book does end, I believe, at issue 34. So this is the last trade of it. But we do still have like 10 issues until it wraps up. So I'm curious to see where we get to it. Overall, I'd say this one is probably... See, I don't want to rate it too high because, like, you know, it still is got its problems. But I'm just so happy to actually, like, finish a Superboy issue without hating my guts afterwards that I want to rate it high. So I think I'll just split the difference. I'll call this an even 7. It's doing good things. And I hope that it continues down that path. There's no guarantee, but I'm hopeful. Green Lantern Corps number 26, written by Robert Venditti and Van Jensen, art by Bernard Chang. So, I mean, last issue was a whole 0-year tie-in, and before that it was other stuff. Like, there's been a lot of stuff going on. This issue is more or less just able to be picked up on where post Lights Out, post Relic and all that, the Green Lantern Corps is just sitting, waiting on Mogo, and we see John and his little crew of rookies are like, okay, we sent off that like hospital wing, the Citadel, in order to save a bunch of people. They should have been here by now. What's going on? And as they look up, they see, you know, a big ball of light, a fiery like thing coming down. And they realize, oh, that's the Citadel. And also, oops, it's coming in hot. So a bunch of Green Lanterns fly up and they give it all they can with their rings. And eventually Mogo speaks out just being like, dudes, hey, I can control the gravity field of my own planet. It's good. And he guides it into a spot and, you know, allows it to sit down. And John immediately is inside of the Citadel calling out for Yura, the Star Sapphire that he's in love with, dating, I don't know. And they share a kiss. So at that point, they step apart and Yura gets the rundown on everything that happened. And we get the other Green Lanterns who, over in the main Green Lantern book, have sworn off using their rings anymore because they don't want to waste the light. And they try to convince John. They're like, hey, John, you were really, really pushing with your Green Lantern ring to like stop the Citadel from falling. Have you ever considered not using your light like that? And he's like, I was going to use it to save them. That was definitely going to happen. And he's just like, right. But like, you don't have to. You can just use other things instead. And he's just like, look, guys, we have to use our rings to save lives. Like, that's the end of it. Like, that's going to happen. And at this point, Hal steps in and just being like, look, regardless of what's going on, we don't have time to fight each other. We are still part of a Corps. That's important here. And we see that there is a problem going on Druk's planet, one of the rookies. And apparently what is their name? I don't know. I'll get to it eventually. They are the Kindt. That's it. The Kindt are essentially offering their protection to Druk's planet as well. And Druk is like, my planet wouldn't take protection. They're strong in their own right. They would never. And it's just like, well, then we need you to go there and tell them to turn it down, because if we have more people falling to the Kindt, then Green Lanterns are going to become hunted pretty much. So John takes Hal aside and is just like, hey, we need to have a talk. We haven't been able to really talk about the things that have gone on since you've been leader. So we cut over to Druk's planet called Oranx, and we see that one of their strong leader type guys named Vrokul is killed and replaced by a Durlin. And the Durlin comes out and is just like, yes, let's head out there. The fight is about to begin. And Druk explains to the other Green Lantern rookies that are with him that the way the Druk's planet, their species, does diplomacy, does like politics, is fight to the death. whoever is the strongest, their opinion will be the one that is listened to. So they land, and at that point, one of the other rookies calls him out and just be like, wait a minute, hold on. You're a politician on your planet? And he's like, no. You need to win 20 fights in like the pit in order to become what's considered a politician. I've won 18, and then the ring pulled me out, and therefore I'm no longer in candidacy to become that. So Druk lands and he says like, oh yeah, hey, let's not, don't go with the Kunde, whatever. And they start immediately tearing them apart. He's like, you're not a warrior anymore. You got that fancy ring. And also you're missing an arm. Like, what kind of warrior are you? And one of the rookies stands up for him, just being like, he saved so many lanterns. That's why he's missing an arm. And Druk's like, don't you fight on my behalf. I don't need you. And so the other lantern flies off in a huff. So at that point, the gladiator fight starts. And we see it gets down to the final two. The Green Lanterns are sitting back. They're letting whatever's going to happen. Until finally, the one that has the opinion that they don't join the Kunde, or maybe the one that does join the Kunde, I'm not really sure. Regardless, gets a shot through the head with a green light. And everyone looks up and they see the one rookie who stood apart. She's like just floating there, and she flies away. She runs, and as she runs down the stairs, everyone gives chase, and we see that she comes across a copy of herself, and it turns out her name is Fesca. Fesca was copied by a Derlin, and the Derlin has framed her for murder. So at that point, we see the Derlin transform into Vrokul, and Vrokul's like, I have her. She's right here. We can do what we need to. Let's take her out in the pit and execute her. And then the other rookies, including Druk, they're like, no, that's a Green Lantern. We can't let that happen. And so Druk goes out and he starts fighting against his own people, and they keep calling him weak. And he just makes a Green Lantern construct of another arm and just starts pounding them down. And he's like, hey, Ring, what caused that wound on the warrior? Was it a Green Lantern ring? And the ring says negative. It was a laser point. It wasn't actually a Green Lantern ring. It's like, there, see? Green Lanterns don't kill. And it's just like, okay, as if we would believe the Lantern Corps investigating one of their own. Screw you, we're going with the Kunde. And they banish Druk from his home. So that's the gist of that one. Meanwhile, intercut with all that, we have Hal talking to John, and John is basically chewing him out, being like, you sent Guy, I want to say Kyle, you sent Guy to the Red Lantern planet to become a Red Lantern. Now there's no more Blue Lantern Corps, and we're not going to be able to change him back. Like, and now you're saying you're declaring war on all of the other corps while he's embedded there? What the hell is wrong with you? And he basically throws a punch and knocks Hal on his ass and just be like, I should like put you in chains and put you away because you are so irresponsible here. You shouldn't be the one running the Corps. And he's like, yeah, you're right. I don't like, this is the responsibility that was shafted upon me by the Guardians. I'm the one who's doing this because I was told I have to. And he says that the place that they're currently talking is the place where Sinestro killed all the other Guardians. And John's like, I didn't realize that's where. He's like, yeah, no, like it's this is where it happened. And you know, John comes to the conclusion. He's like, look, I'm just mad at everything that's happened. I'm sorry. I'm taking that on you. And he's like, hey, don't worry about it. I get it. I probably deserve a punch to the face after everything that's happened. But like, I need you around because we need someone to build back up what was Oa here on Mogo. We need an architect in order to control all this. So we see John is talking to Yira and basically planning it all out. He's got the whole city planned, and he talks to Mogo and it's like, hey, Mogo, do you think you can handle such, like, you know, not actually microscopic, but microscopic to you things? And he's just like, I mean, I've never messed with it that much, but yeah, I can terraform myself pretty well. And he follows all of John's plans, and we see the new city for the Green Lanterns is built on Mogo. And as John is in the barracks at the end of a long day, he's making out with Yira and just saying, hey, look, I thought that you wanted me to leave the Corps, but I can't now. And she's like, I don't want you to anymore. Your dedication is what's so inspiring about you. So yeah, I'll stay with you here on Mogo. And that's where we see down in the bottom of the planet, navigating through some of the tunnels, is a Durlin who has made his way into a deeper part where there's a whole bunch of other Durlins and saying, yes, we have rejoined the core on Mogo. We're ready to enact the final part of our plan. We will rid the universe of Green Lanterns. So yeah, a lot going on. I like the idea. I like the plot that's going on with the Durlins and this idea of like a group that is dedicated to basically engineering the downfall of the Green Lanterns. And obviously a good way to explore that is they're not doing it through like killing off the Green Lanterns. They're doing it politically. They're setting up these sabotage things. I like the idea of that. What I'm not such a fan of is the fact that we are solely focused on these rookies as they're going about. It's just, I don't know. I feel like John should at least be accompanying them at the minimum, or at least we get some Lanterns that we're more familiar with. Kilowog or something like that. Scalix. Any of that stuff would have been great. The fact that it does follow these rookies that I'm not that familiar with and makes them our only point of view, I don't know. While the story itself is still good, I feel like we could have had a better lens to view it through. But overall, I am still enjoying it. So I'll go ahead and say this one is I'll give it a 7.5. It's a quality comic. Don't really have much of a problem with it, but it's just a shy little hair away from being a great comic. So yeah, 7.5. I am looking forward to seeing the next one. World's Finest number 18, written by Paul Levitz, art by R.B. Silva and Scott McDaniel. So last issue, Power Girl, in order to try to fix her powers, went up into the sun, or real close to it, and turns out that didn't work because she came down and she couldn't control her powers, but now she was overpowered. So we see her floating above the water. Huntress is trying to get a hold of her. And Huntress is saying like, hey, you're going to bring down the bridge. Let's control yourself. She's like, I can't. Oh, geez. So Huntress throws up her crossbow to like grapple around Power Girl's legs and then just tries to yank her down as best she can. And obviously she's like floating up in the air. Not much to be done. So she fires off another grappling hook into a nearby boat, which then gives them enough power to drag Power Girl down into the water, where basically she just starts like dunking her, just pushing her head underwater and trying to cool her down until finally she's like, Jesus Christ, it's the East River. I'm going to die now. She's like, all right, but it's like, good. Are you good now? And she's like, yeah, I'm cooling down. So at that point, she goes up, fixes the bridge of the damage that she caused to it. And she's like, okay, well, my plan didn't work. My powers are still on the fritz, but now it's the opposite where like I just randomly shoot off too much energy. And then all of a sudden she starts like feeling woozy. She's like, oh God, and it's the other way too. So she passes out and is down in the river again. So we cut over to Brooklyn where we find the tattoo girl talking to a man who's like wearing like cult robes, more or less. And she's begging, just like, please, I've done what you've asked. I've attacked the vain people of the city. Please lift your curse. And he's like, oh, my demon that I have behind me named Zazdi, he demands more of you. You have been marked with his tattoos. So go out and continue doing it. It's not a curse. It's a blessing. It's a power. So use it or lose it, baby. And he sends her back out there to continue attacking injustice in the world and whatnot. So we see sometime later in Manhattan, Power Girl and Huntress, or I should say they're civilians, Helena and Karen, are sitting just looking out the balcony. And Karen makes the point of like, do you think that like everyone has a doppelganger on this planet? Or is it just like the superheroes? Is it just like the important ones? And he's just like, I don't know. Who cares? Like, we shouldn't be interacting with them anyway. This isn't our Earth. We want to get back home, remember? And she's like, yeah, right. But like, I got a few boys I wanted to visit, and I wondered if they still exist on this world. And he's just like, Jesus, all right, yes, always about boys. And Helena's makes her point clear. It's just like, look, if they're out there, let them be happy. I don't need to talk to them. So at that point, they bicker a little bit about how Kara's a optimist and Helena's a pessimist, but overall they still have their way. And just like, look, let's go ahead and find this lady, this arsonist with the tattoos and the shadow powers, and I've got an idea. So at that point, Kara's like, okay, well, here's the thing. You go ahead and look for them, whatever method you want to with your computers and such, and I'm just going to use my powers to fly around town, and we'll see who can do it first. Whoever finds it last buys the other dinner. So Kara flies off and just like, all right, there's only like 10 million people in the city. How hard could it be to find one person? And we see that Helena's plan is to basically use surveillance footage and try to track her down that way. And she does manage to get a recognition finding her coming out of the place in Brooklyn that we saw before. So she stakes out the place, and Helena manages to get the drop on her, kicks her in the back, and stops her from using her hands. But as she's binding her up, the tattoo lady manages to tap one of her tattoos, which still causes the same effect. She manages to push Helena away. And then she watches the tattoo lady run inside and then sits outside for like an hour, it says. Or maybe I'm just misreading this. Maybe she sat outside for 2 hours beforehand. I don't know. Regardless, she goes in, says nobody else should be in there. It should be easy. It's not a trap. But then, of course, inside is the other cult guy. So Helena manages to flip him over her shoulder and take both of them out. But then all of a sudden that wakes up the statue of the demon. And the demon statue starts using its own shadow magic against Helena. Power Girl comes in, immediately starts ripping off all the shadows, and then throws a punch at the statue, then tying together all of his shadow magics into a knot. But then, of course, her powers give out and she starts passing out again. At which point the statue becomes real. It becomes a real monster. It starts attacking Power Girl, and she's like, oh, screw powers. If Helena's able to do this without powers every day, I should be able to too. And so she stands up and she's ready to fight. She tumbles out of the way a few times before coming across Huntress's crossbow and uses it to shoot the monster in the chest, where it then explodes, and then that's it. That's the whole fight. So we then go to a restaurant where Helena's like, why am I paying? I'm the one who found him first. You were just following me. She's like, right, but then I saved your ass. So, haha, you owe me. And I guess that means that the tattoo character is gone. She literally never got a real name. It's only in this back matter that I know that her name is Tat. So, yeah. That's the arc. There's only so many times I could say the exact same thing, which is this book feels like a disconnected series of events that are just ever so loosely strung together with like what could be very generously called a plot. And I've said this since like issue 4. It just seems like there's no real guiding motion to this. It's just a generic, and now we're doing this, and now we're doing that. And it's just moving along that way. And this is no different. Now all of a sudden there's a demon statue that gives tattoo powers, and then Power Girl's powers short out, so then she has to shoot it with a crossbow. Like, it doesn't feel like anything has ever been set up. It feels like everything is just kind of guiding on from whatever happened last issue in a kind of Mad Lib style. So I don't dislike it. It's not an awful read, but it's also such a quick read because it doesn't feel like it's trying to bog down anything with any sort of setup. It's just stream of consciousness writing, more or less. So yeah, I'll give this one I'll give it a 6.5. It's 6 sounds better, but like that's too harsh because it's not bad. It's just meh. It's just like the most basic I think a comic story can be told. So yeah, 6.5. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this December 11th, 2013. And as my throat is currently completely closing up from having used it so much for this episode, the end of this episode will be done in American Sign Language. So, I don't know American Sign Language. So anyway, comics next week, because I'm serious though. I can barely talk. Next week we have, in no particular order, Batman and Robin, Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Supergirl, Green Lantern, New Guardians, Justice League of America's Vibe, Wonder Woman, Animal Man, Trinity of Sin Pandora, and Forever Evil, Rogue's Rebellion. Some of that stuff has to do with Forever Evil. Some of that stuff is Harley Quinn. Okay, one of those stuffs is Harley Quinn, but you get the picture. Apologies for that. Yeah, no, it's a pretty light week overall, and it's only going to get lighter because the week after that is Christmas. And turns out that businesses have decided that it's not a good idea to put out comics on a week where everyone's spending time with their family. So I'm going to be scrambling to figure out what I'm going to be doing for that week, but I'll deal with that when I get to it. For now, let me just tell you, if you got anything you want to say about the comics I talked about this week, last week, any week at all, go ahead and hit me up on any one of the places I've got linked in the description. We got a Discord, we got a subreddit, we have a Patreon, we've got all these different places and more for you to share your opinion. Really, though, I do read through all of them, including that one that is clearly like a Russian spam bot that just keeps saying, like, reach for your dreams. I don't even see the link in there. I don't know how it's trying to scam me, but, like, clearly they didn't watch my video because I do nothing but reach for my dreams. I never get them, but I reach. Anyway, that's going to do it for me. Thank you very much for watching and listening. However it is you consume this podcast, be sure to give it whatever sort of positive rating you want, but keep your negative ones to yourself. And always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.